What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I am going to be bringing to you a video on some brand new cards out of Phantom Rage that I never had the opportunity to talk about before. So many things about Phantom Rage are really resonating with me, and I'm really liking the direction of the card design when it comes to this deck in particular, mainly because it just seems like this is the direction that we should have gone with card design for Yu-Gi-Oh! Several years ago, in terms of just introducing a lot of very generic, very powerful cards, but have their own specific purposes and niches. And so that's why I wanted to go ahead and bring you guys that video today. So I'm not gonna make you guys wait any longer. We have a few cards to cover, so let's go ahead and get right into it. So first up here, we have Dark World Reinforcements. It's a normal spell. Love the throwback to the Dark World monsters in the artwork too. You can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. Target one level 4 or lower fiend monster in your graveyard. Special summon it, then discard one fiend monster. So obviously it's Dark World support because it has Dark World in the name, but that's not what most people are looking at this card for. This is clearly Burning Abyss support at its finest because that's one of the strongest fiend decks we've ever had, and frankly, this could be a very strong extender in some circumstances. Now, there's an argument to be made that Burning Abyss doesn't even want to play a card like this because the deck is very monster heavy and monster focused for the most part, but at the very least it's a way to resurrect any Burning Abyss, which gets you halfway to a Dante or any of your other rank 3s, or even like a quarter of the way up the chain to get to something bigger like maybe Borrelsword Dragon or Axis Code Talker. But being able to just discard a fiend in addition to resurrecting something, yeah, in terms of card advantage it's a little bit wonky, but you typically want your monsters in the graveyard, so this is a very, very strong tool for that deck, and I'm really excited to see if people are going to mess around with this. But this is what I'm talking about, right? Like, clearly this isn't going to go in every deck, but it's very good for the decks that it could potentially be used for, and so I really like that design. Same thing goes for this. This is actually a very generic card, and that's why I wanted to talk about it next. This is Cordinarol, the Gem Transferer. So it is an Earth Rock Link effect monster, Link 2 with 1200 attack, and it has Link arrows that go top right and bottom left. It requires any 2 effect monster, so it's basically generic, and the effect reads, well, actually it has 2 effects. First effect is the linked card and monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effect. So at the very least, it's a way to kind of insulate your board from what your opponent may be doing, which is pretty cool. And then the second effect reads, if this card points to 2 monsters, you can switch control of those 2 monsters. So it's effectively creature swap, but what's neat about this is that it's non-targeting, non-destruction removal. Now, it does require you to not only get this onto the board, but also have another monster, and your opponent has to play a card in either the far left zone or the middle zone because of the way the arrows kind of point to on this card specifically. If it's not in either one of those zones, this card is not going to be that effective. However, this is a card that's going to shift how people are going to have to play the game, right? Because if this card is in the format, which there's a very high likelihood that it could be, then the fact that your opponent is not going to be able to use the first or the third zone, and then if you want to throw like Relinquished Anima into the mix, that shuts off the second and the fourth zone. That means the only real safe zone is the far right zone that you have, and then if you're going up against like Orcus, that's not even safe because Long Girsu can hit that. So I love this type of like zone control that some of these Link monsters have built into their effects, and this is just a generically good Link too. I mean, it doesn't give you 2 arrows going down, but at the cost of one of those arrows being traded off, you're getting something very powerful, and albeit it is a little bit niche, it could be a very, very powerful card under the right circumstances. Next up, we have Feedback. So this is Eater of Millions evolving into Eater of Billions, it looks like. So it's a trap card. Banish any number of cards from your extra deck face down. And if you do, banish face up that many random face down cards from your opponent's extra deck until the end phase. So the wording's a little bit weird on this, but basically, if you banish 5 cards from your extra deck face down, your opponent will randomly banish 5 cards from their extra deck face up. And then that's only until the end phase. But this is really good for a few reasons. First of all, this is a great card in Gren Maju. If you're looking to just immediately pump your Gren Maju like a mid-combat or like just a kind of like as a battle trick, instead of it being as obvious with something like Eater of Millions throwing your whole extra deck into the banish pile, this is a really cool way that you can do that. The one thing I like about this card, though, outside of Gren Maju, is its application as this sort of combo interrupter, combo breaker, because let's say you're playing a deck that doesn't necessarily care about playing an extra deck. Grenmaju is obviously one, but there's plenty that really don't need their extra deck whatsoever. This could be a very powerful side deck card against combo decks specifically, because you have to think a lot of the top tier combo decks really have a majority of the cards that they need in their extra deck. And you'll see in some combo videos when they do their turn one completely uninterrupted that they're going to go through 10, 11, 12, maybe even 13 cards in their extra deck. So even if you banish half of the cards in your extra deck to make your opponent banish half of theirs, even if it's until the end phase, that could just be enough for you to win the game right there. And keep in mind, again, going back to Grenmaju, your cards don't go back to the extra deck, but theirs do. So then if you happen to have the Grenmaju in hand, you can just have it immediately pumped up to whatever value you would like. I think this card is very, very powerful. I think, again, the biggest downside to this is that you have to use it going first. And so if you're going first, there's obviously a myriad of other cards and options you can play that this definitely loses some of its potency. But if you are going first and you don't really care about your extra deck and you're looking for a way to be able to just break down your opponent's plays and just make it completely difficult for them to play if they are on combos specifically, then this is going to be a very powerful card. Anytime there's hate towards the extra deck, since a majority of strategies at the top tiers of play require the extra deck, this is going to be a very good card. Now, this is one of the newer cards. I think this came out about a couple days ago at the time of recording. This is Warning Point. Now, if you guys remember Dimensional Barrier, this is kind of like a new modernized version of it. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but we'll go ahead and talk about it. So it's another normal trap card. When a monster or monsters is summoned face up, for the rest of this turn, those face up monsters cannot attack. They have their effects negated, if any, and they cannot be used as material for fusion, synchro, xyz, or link summons. So this is really, really strong. Now, the thing about this is that if you want to immediately compare this to Dimensional Barrier, the problem is the fact that it doesn't just blanket stop your opponent from performing any of those summons, right? It only affects the monsters that were specifically summoned at the time that you flipped Warning Point face up. But that isn't necessarily too bad, because think about how many decks might just have like a key normal summon, and then that's kind of what kickstarts the rest of their plays. Well, if they go like normal summon and you Warning Point them, then their turn may just end, because if they're so reliant on the extra deck for the rest of their plays to go through, then they may not have any other plays. And the fact that this includes link summoning where Dimensional Barrier does not, that's one of the big distinguishing factors as to why this card could potentially see play. Again, I think one of the limiting factors is similar to Feedback, is that it is a trap card. Now, that didn't stop Dimensional Barrier from seeing play, but Dimensional Barrier is a lingering effect, and you have to think, if any deck is able to extend with their own deck and what they're able to do and summon monsters after that initial summon or summons when you activate Warning Point, then it's going to be a little bit difficult for you to justify wanting to play this card. But again, I really like the design. I think this is a fairly balanced card in terms of what it's able to do. It can be a nice catch-all if your opponent is very limited and reliant on a single summon getting into the rest of their extra deck, but it can actually not really do a whole lot if your opponent can extend beyond that. So again, I think this is just a fairly decent card and really should just be the design direction moving forward, that it's generic. You know, a lot of decks can play this, could definitely see side deck play for sure. And now, oh boy, this is the main reason I wanted to make this video. This card is ridiculous. So this is Negalogia AA Zeus. Really weird name, but oh man, when you see the effect on this card is just absurd. So it's a light machine xyz effect, rank 12, 3000 attack, 3000 defense. It requires 2 level 12 monsters to xyz summon into, but that doesn't matter because the first part of this text reads, once per turn, if an xyz monster battled that turn, you can also xyz summon this card by using any xyz monster you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. One of the really interesting things about this card is that you don't have to use the xyz monster that you battled with. So hypothetically, if you have 2 xyz monsters, and let's say one of them is in attack position, but your opponent's monster has a higher attack value, you can attack into their monster and crash your xyz monster, but use the other xyz monster as material. It doesn't say you have to specifically use the one that battled. Again, that's a little bit specific because that means you have to have 2 xyz monsters on the field, but if you look at a deck like Burning Abyss or any deck that can easily get its Xyz monsters back out onto the field, that isn't too difficult to achieve. Now, the reason you're going to want to play this card is the first effect. So as a quick effect, you can detach 2 Xyz materials from this card, send all other cards on the field to the graveyard. Wow, 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 wow. So this is like I want to say this is like a more monster-focused version of like Evenly Matched, right? Because you have to use your battle phase. It doesn't banish all the cards, but it actually just sends them to the graveyard, but it also sends your cards too, right? Typically, when you use Evenly Matched, you're going to be doing in a one-sided fashion, and this same application applies here to this card, right? You're not going to want to really be using this if you're ahead, but it's nice that this is a way to literally just equalize the field, and it sends all their cards on the field to the graveyard. Going back to the Burning Abyss example, that may not be a bad thing, because if you're playing a graveyard focused deck like Burning Abyss, you can then trigger all of your Burning Abyss cards, and then you're going to be feeling pretty good about it, because then you can start to rebuild your board in main phase 2, and this card is just going to be absolutely backbreaking for anyone who has to go up against it. The second effect is once per turn, if another card you control is destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can choose one card from your hand, deck, or extra deck and attach it to this card as Xyz material. So it even has built-in destruction protection that also helps get it back to its first effect. I think you're typically only going to be resolving that effect once, and in most instances, that's probably going to win you the duel unless you just play a very slow focused deck. But this card is just absurd. This is going to really change the dynamic when it comes to Xyz monsters specifically being incorporated into decks, or any deck that already plays Xyz monsters natively in the strategy, because this can just be a card that can just blow people out left and right. Now, again, it's still fairly balanced, right? Because if you're ahead in the game, this card is pretty useless, because you're never going to want to drop this when you're ahead on cards, and you do still have to relinquish your battle phase. You still need to have the Xyz monsters on the field to be able to summon this card out in the first place, but it has a huge payoff if your deck already plays Xyz monsters. I just love this design. The artwork is also incredible as well. This is going to be the bane of so many players' existence if they happen to go up against any sort of Xyz focus strategy. I think there's a lot of potential with this card. And again, this is just so cool. I really just love all the designs coming out of Phantom Rage, and I really just hope we keep going in this direction, because these cards are not only fairly generic, they're very fairly specific, I would say, to specific types of decks, but they're interesting, they're exciting, they're cards that I actually want to mess around with and kind of experiment with, because they're not too limiting in their application. And sure, not every card is going to be a winner, but it just seems like with Phantom Rage specifically, they're really making the extra effort to take some of the even just generic other cards in the set and make them widely applicable and actually semi-playable. Like, who would have thought that, right? Especially after some of the sets we've seen in the past. I like it. I think it's definitely good that we should be moving in this direction, and I really just hope to see more of it. Who knows? But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.